This is where the show would go on break for a few months, and then really hit its stride. While the preceding episodes, bar shell shocks, were not actually bad, you can see they were rushing a lot with the early stuff. Less so from here on out. Ironic, as at the time, Power Rangers had a weekday block of programming, and the majority of the tail-end Power Rangers seasons would play on weekday afternoons, while the early side would show up on Saturday mornings. But this is where the tone and themes of the show begin to more take center stage. Alva finishes an analysis of the key cards, and they are to a weapon hidden on the moon of Jupiter. My god! The key cards must unlock the power of the monolith that's been sighted around Europa. That or Exodia the Forbidden One, either or really. No, the cards actually go to the Voyager machines, called the Mega Vehicles or Mega Vs in space, placed out on Jupiter because, well, they couldn't use the moon for such a base, since for 4 years of the show, the villains had been operating out of a base on the moon. It was claimed territory, and any such weapons without ridiculous safeguards would have been used against them. However, I think this is a missed opportunity. It soon after established the space powers were intended to be for the Power Rangers of KO-35. Considering the discussion of Corone that happened in the previous episode, it would have made a lot of sense for Darkonda to call them to KO-35 for such a battle, and then to learn the Voyager machines had been stored on that planet's moon, forgotten while its defenders fell. The last signs of his civilization's defiance against evil that they were unable to use as they only had one of the Rangers required to pilot active, and lacked the key cards. Hell, you could have adjusted the narrative of the previous episode to say, I took these from the siege of KO-35, and it would have worked far better since that way Andros would have known their significance. It'd have made a lot more narrative sense than, Zordon just left these here and forgot about them all the times we were in need of an emergency set of Zords the past few years. Then again, they were likely tied to these powers, so other Ranger teams wouldn't have been able to use them in the first place, so one could have easily done what I suggested. What I think is interesting is, while the Mega Voyager's introduction comes earlier than its source material, it allows for more dynamic utilization of the mecha, and this was the first time Power Rangers was allowed to do that. Once the Mega Voyager entered the picture in Mega Ranger, Delta and Galaxy Megas were both all but left abandoned aside from a small number of incidents. But because there is still a fair chunk of early Mega Ranger footage to use, it feels as if there's actual strategy in their choices, using what's best for the situation instead of just the strongest Megazord they have. That's actually a problem with many more recent Sentai series. They push so many mechs and combinations out, once the newest part of the toy line makes its debut, the previous ones can be forgotten, leaving there no actual versatility in their use, despite that being exactly what arm and mode changes for Megazords are supposed to be for. But Power Rangers can actually make that something of its own benefit by being allowed to mix it up a bit more as part of the adaptation. And another of the strengths we end up seeing from here on out in Power Rangers until RPM ended. However, the Megaship is still in horrendous shape even after Darkonda is defeated, for now as he has extra lives, meaning the Mega Voyager keeps center stage for some time to give it the proper introduction. As the show can't write out the Megaship for that long due to its necessary utilization as their primary form of interstellar transportation. But this is where another of the cleanup moments from last season would take place. True Blue to the rescue recenters focus on Justin Stewart, the former Blue Turbo Ranger, and count me in the camp that believes he was a bad idea. Justin, played by Blake Foster, was a preteen ranger added into the show on suggestion of Shuki Levy, likely inspired by Ko the Keeper Ranger from Die Ranger, forgetting or not realizing Ko being a kid was one of the detractions to Die Ranger, despite his story arc actually being engaging. As such, justifying his legitimacy of being a ranger by being smart, clever, and skilled would often make the show veterans and those his elder look outright idiotic in comparison. Thus, turning him into Power Rangers' version of Star Trek's Wesley Crusher and Doctor Who's Adric. This has happened and backfired enough in television that, frankly, even by the 90s, they should know better than to freaking do this. The irony? Blake Foster is not a bad actor. His character never came off as annoying, and he had a number of good episodes in later Turbo he carried better than a lot of child actors I can name. I like him a hell of a lot more than the cast of freaking ToQger. So seeing him again as part of the follow-up to his abrupt departure from the show in the last season's finale does not have the stigma to it like one might expect, instead being good closure for the character, and thus becomes one of the better in-space episodes. The plot opens by focusing on Lightning Cruiser and Stormblaster, two sentient vehicles part of the Turbo team, attempting to escape enslavement by Divatox's forces, only the latter of the two succeeding. Now behold! Cars in space! The space team's alerted to the attempts to recapture the vehicle and go to help, only to be hit hard by Lionizer, and summarily capture themselves. Now, from this one can infer the implication the story's structured this way so the super special child character can be the one that saves the day by rescuing them, and it is. However, this is a recurring thing this season, happening both before and after this event. Astronema and their other enemies are just that clever and powerful now that even with all of their advantages, they've been repeatedly struggling to earn the victories they've had. Thus, it's not because Justin's a special fucking snowflake, but another in a crowd of people that come to their assistance because of who they are and what they've done, supporting their efforts from beginning to end. His inclusion in the story is actually very well framed, concerned over his friends, as because he moved from Angel Grove, he doesn't know they're back and around. And because he's currently powerless, couldn't do anything to help their efforts even had he remained there.
My morpher!
Well, so much for being powerless. Yes, Stormblaster has a spare turbo morpher, because the last one was wrecked, allowing him to transform again. How he has the power to is anyone's guess, as Eltar's been conquered and that was retconned to be the source of the turbo powers in the finale. But considering previous and later seasons have the powers more ingrained into the people, it might just be he needed the replacement gear to access it. He frees the others and together they fight off the forces, showcasing a team-up of Blues, overwhelming Lionizer and destroying it. After which, they return to Lightning Cruiser and free him as well. The episode ends on a pretty nice coda all things considered, showing us not just out the door and out of their lives as previous departures have implied. But Invasion of the Body Switcher, the following episode, is just one that should simply have stayed buried. While it fits the season's overarching themes, it just gets damn awkward and uncomfortable at points after you have watched the season fully. Okay, let me explain. Astronema activates a monster that can swap the appearances of anything, and uses it to take on the appearance of Ashley, who is abducted while out on her own so she can infiltrate the ship, subdue the other Rangers while unawares, and thus subjugate the last major resistance they have against conquest. By the way, the monster, to show its power, changes into a bunch of creatures originating from the Metal Hero series B-Fighter, and thus by proxy, Beetleborgs. Now here's the part where it gets disturbing. Astronema is Corone, Andros' sister. We learned that in another 8 episodes. She was abducted by Darkonda for reasons never explained, and ended up in the care of Ecliptor after she had her mind wiped, and thus raised to be her showcased evil self. She has taken the form of Ashley, someone her brother is attracted to, and Ashley shares those feelings as well. We've seen enough flirting between the two at this point to more than justify that belief. Do you get what's creepy about this in hindsight? It's what makes this episode go wrong for many on the rewatch, myself included. You know, on top of the whole Grand Theft Me thing going on as well. I might like when mature themes make it into Power Rangers, and by proxy other shows intended for primarily a child or family demographic, but that's because such allows for a wider legitimized viewer base and has historically made for a more enduring show quality-wise. However, this kind of unintended subtext was probably not a good thing to include. Of course, the monster, using the costume of Hel Najira, is not the sharpest tool in the shed, Ashley managing to trick it so she assumes Astronema's form, and subsequently tricks Elgar, the worst character of Turbo that for some reason stuck around this season when he was not in any way needed, into freeing her, after which she makes her way to Andros and the disguised Astronema, all while the seeds of doubt in her path are laid.
No one's ever been truly nice to me before.
Seriously, this actually ends up being a plot point later. The reveal of the Swish happens as the other Rangers are freed by Alpha, because the bad guys constantly overlook Alpha this season. Seriously, Rita and Zed got this right on multiple occasions. Anyways, Andros has to figure out which Astronema is actually Ashley, using the transformation pose as the giveaway, resulting in...
I wouldn't want to be a Power Ranger anyway.
It's like rain.
As the episode ends with Ashley returned to normal, Andros slinks away to a hidden medical chamber, revealing what happened to Yusaku's counterpart. He's in stasis. Survival of Silver brings this issue to the fore as, while checking a planet, the team come under attack, and the ship ends up being damaged ridiculously easily. I like to think, since it was trashed a few episodes before, that things are not back to 100%, but they couldn't afford the time to get it back to full capabilities at this point. It does not excuse, however, how many things could be wrecked on the external hull or outer areas of the ship to warrant such system failures. Critical systems should be in its core sections. The hull is for shielding, windows, weapon encampments, maneuvering components, and airlocks. Having other components necessary for keeping a ship running mounted externally, well, makes me want to make a Skyrim joke. In fact, I will. I used to be a Megazord, but then they broke the critical systems on my knee. But this leads to the four Earthlings finding the medical room and discovering...
His name is Zane. He's a Silver Ranger.
Zane, as Andros explains, has been in a coma since the fall of KO-35 2 years before, when he took an attack meant for him. He used to be his partner, but the trauma he suffered from losing someone like that, well, it explains a lot about his early dealings with the others, especially since there's no guarantee he'd wake up. Question: why is he still morphed? It's pretty consistent in Henshin Hero series that, when someone's in a transformed state and take a severe amount of damage, they end up being powered down. Granted, when such doesn't happen, it makes some events more dramatic, but it's still odd.
Why didn't you tell us?
It's pretty obvious, really. Earth-based Rangers haven't really had to face the harshness of consequences of death before. Beyond the Green Candle arc, I should say. It's something the show, and a grand majority of Western series, refuse to confront, show the meaning and weight in the loss of a life. Or they are at least not properly executing such, so there doesn't feel to be a lasting impact. But when the ship crashes, as alluded to before, by a monster wreaking havoc on the hull, the destabilization of systems caused a loss in stability in the stasis system.
He can't be!
This is a really appropriate response for this character, and I wish we'd seen this coming from him on 2 following occasions when it should have been. But like Power Rangers would kill off someone before introducing them or as part of someone's backstory. That isn't part of a direct adaptation, at least. But yes, Zane, played by Justin Nemo, is up and quickly takes care of the monster, which goes giant.
Decker, lift up now!
Your ship crashed for a freaking reason and you have not fixed the damage it did. How are you getting the ship up into space? At least use the stock transformation that's in the atmosphere, guys! But yes, they win, and Zane's welcomed with open arms by the team, and then immediately begins to flirt with Ashley. Whoops. Thus begins the Zane story arc. As there are only so many episodes where Mega Silver is a relevant and showcased character, and they were on a budget, the production team decided to slot a fair chunk of them together so as to have a consistent showcasing and establishment of the character, before sending him off to do his own thing, so he wouldn't pointlessly sit out battles when he's around and could have been of use. And instead of making them all about Zane all the time, they also wisely instead utilized his presence to spark character shifts, development, and conflicts. Seen first in Red with Envy, in which I now need to play a Simpsons clip.
Jealousy is when you're worried someone will take what you have. Envy is wanting what someone else has.
See, Zane seems to be edging in on Ashley to Andros' discomfort since he likes her, but such is a lot more benign, the end of the episode resulting in the pair finally starting to go out after he helps set such up. However, the moment is inciting a realization over 2 critical things. 1. Actual interpersonal conflict on the show that is organic to events. Such had previously been limited to Discordian spellworks or just out-of-character acts among the main cast characters. 2. Realization by Andros of how much he's changed, in that he's frustrated how Zane has not really taken in the weight of their whole situation, mainly because he slept through it, and has not been shown conceptualizing the weight of their loss at all. He's the most carefree of the 6, when they don't really have a reason to be. They're in a war, and they're losing. The whole thing with Ashley is more of an easy way for his subconscious to vent such aggravation. At least that's my take on it. However, the team ends up captured, necessitating Zane to come in and rescue them, and they make up for the event, Andros learning he really didn't have anything to worry about. However, during the battle, Zane's power cuts out, leaving him vulnerable. While the show could have played this like Mega Ranger did, in that the sixth man is often left out due to the usage limit, possibly have had his morpher damaged in the incident that left him in a coma, that would have complicated things in the long run. Instead, it was wisely considered more likely that Astronema would catch on to this weakness and quickly find a way to exploit it, because she is not stupid. And without the other concerns of his counterparts, fixing this glitch in his powers is a higher priority for Zane. But consultation with Alpha is overheard by the others, leading to the same misconception as in the Sentai.
They think I'm dying.
He's being so...
Wait, what was that?
They think I'm dying.
He's being so brave.
My god! Power Rangers referenced death and didn't sub in the term destroy! Yeah, this is a pet peeve of mine, as destroy has never been a good substitution for the term death, as destroy implies the actions happening to an inanimate object, an abstract thing. It's not used to refer to a person or sentient being outside of forms of pacification or euthanasia. It is a means by which to dehumanize someone, make their existence and life have less purpose and meaning. Thus, the word doesn't carry the proper impact or the correct connotation, and a lot of people draw the wrong context as a result. But this isn't so much a problem with Power Rangers, but the insistence in many, not all, Western shows aimed at kids seeking to trivialize themes that possess any form of maturity, even though the best kids shows, since the dawn of television, possess such. As a result, this is another area where Power Rangers diverges from the Sentai on vastly. While Sentai tends to be wackier, such moments of levity, when they aren't overriding the focus of the show, are needed to countenance and balance out how mature and serious the series can often get. Which Bandora from Zyuranger became evil because her son was murdered and her rage would not let her mourn. Death is a regular thing, not just in Sentai, but Tokusatsu. That's part of the realism of the genre that helps keep the fantasy grounded. It's not always graphic, nor needs to be. It doesn't even have to be permanent to carry the weight of the event. It just needs to be framed correctly to properly impact the cost of a life and its effect on the characters, which can be achieved. And only a hack would trivialize and screw up that history in their own machinations. Fuck Kamen Rider Tyson. But that's often the struggle in Power Rangers, to try and do the same with not just a censorship limitation, but the false reputation not even striving for such, which has not been helped at all with the modern Neo-Saban era mostly disregarding even attempting it, as it's overall more lighthearted. But being lighthearted, that's not a bad thing, as it makes it all the more meaningful when we are allowed to see depth and maturity truly come into play, increasing the investment of the audience when it's a legitimate danger. And the following Saban and Disney seasons, most of them, would work to properly emphasize destroy as meaning death. How? By evocative acting, proper direction, and correct framing of the scenes that, while still with a far lighter hand than has less of an impression, still tried to carry the significance of the event, more often than not succeeding. That is something worthy of merit that we really did begin to see here, and allowed later stories to take full advantage of that, becoming not only more memorable as a result, but lasting. Destroy no longer implied break their stuff or leave the Power Rangers without their powers. It meant kill them. Anyways, the reason Zane's powers are shorting out is they've been drained from constant use, by him staying morphed constantly for 2 years while comatose. Which, while not a bad utilization and purpose for that plot point, still makes me baffled why Andros didn't just power him down when he was put into stasis if this could be a consequence of that. Zane tries to hide the fact his powers are failing while he finds a way to fix them, all the while Astronema concocts a plan and recruits a monster to do him in when his current time limit expires. This, of course, leads to one of the series' most insane and yet awesome scenes. Zane having his powers restored to full by a lightning strike. Why is it so awesome? Because since the first season, there's been a lightning bolt in the graphic. Electrical imagery has been used to emphasize their powers or beings of power. Previous Rangers have had their powers restored by a transfer of energy, taking the form of lightning. It's series synergistic symbolism! And more than that, it's playing into the season's themes, gambling on the long-sought chance at victory and success because it's their duty as those with these powers to protect the powerless. So with Zane back at full power, he's got nothing to worry about from recycled stock footage. A Date with Destiny is probably another of the weaker episodes, but still playing into the arc. Astronema oversees the attacks of one of her monsters, only for it to turn on her from a stray shot she fired at Zane. He in turn saves her from it, and as she's unconscious, takes her into the woods and leaves her by a fire. And why are you still morphed, Zane? This suddenly feels like a brighter lit slasher movie. But since kindness has been something in short supply in her life, it sets off, well, the beginnings of a shift in interactions that's consistent with my character interpretation of Astronema. If the Power Rangers really did kill her family, why are they so nice? It's what I think ends up motivating her not only sparing him in turn, but looking more into Zane and by proxy the others as more than an enemy. Speaking of, how did they get pinup poses of each other? Is there like a magazine that features the superhero/villain of the month which includes 8x10 glossies? I mean, outside of Hyper Hobby magazine. So she gives Ecliptor free reign to perform his own plot as she goes down sans her battle gear, and stalks Zane, who comes across directly pining for her as well. And, well, there's love at first sight and all that, but there's little to no build-up to this, which makes it come off weaker than it should. I know, limitation of funds and time available, they made the best of what they had for this act. Speaking of, she's the one that asks him out, through way of arrows aimed at his head. A not-so-subtle threat to show up. Plus, if she was off target, congratulations! One less ranger to worry about. But Ecliptor's machinations, yes, I have to play the clip again, lead to Zane having to rescue the others, and thus be late for their date, and to Astronema's endless fury. I like to think she realized after Ecliptor reported his failure that she overreacted, thus why in a following episode there seems to be some lingering affection. But the Zane arc ends with a pretentiously named Zane's Destiny. And I have to say, the sandstorm effect used throughout this episode for planet surface shots is fantastic. I have no idea how they accomplished this, substituting smoke in a color filter, sandbags from a giant fan, or even going out into a real sandstorm to film. I don't know what they did, it just looks great. Anyways, the team investigates this planet on a routine search for Zordon, and end up running into La Resistance. Which resistance? The KO-35 resistance. Yes, by happenstance, the people of two of the Rangers just so happen to be hiding out on this planet. They corner and capture the ones not of their world, disbelieving of their words and proclamations of being Power Rangers due to the statements made by their military leader, who happens to be Darkonda in disguise. Yeah, he's back, and reassigned to spy on the Resistance while using the Coralizer monster to slowly thin their numbers and turn on themselves from suspicion and distrust. But considering the Rangers are a bigger threat, what with the powers and all that, it does make sense to shift the blame onto them until they're dead. The only thing that's stopping them is their people's leader that doesn't want them slipping into savagery. And then he gets turned into a coral creature while the Rangers try escaping. And no one thinks that convenient for the people proclaiming their innocence. Granted, it's a high-tension, high-emotion situation where everyone is paranoid, so you get a mulligan from that. However, the purported lynching of the team is held off by Andros and Zane's appearance, recognized by some of their leaders, as they happen to be leaders from before the planet fell. Or, you know, the identity of their world's Power Rangers was more common knowledge. But that leads to the revelation of Darkonda's identity, and thus the Rangers fighting off the monster while Zane goes after him and kills him once again because he has multiple lives. The coralized victims are returned to normal, and the people are far more grateful. But because their location has been compromised, they have to evacuate. Zane's destiny taking the form of going with them and making sure they stay safe. Which really is not a destiny so much as a decision. Zane's choice would have made a better title, but we'll be seeing him again in a few episodes. Always a Chance, upon rewatching the show, is probably my favorite episode. And I can tell you why in one scene.
Adam?
Yes, it's the episode featuring the return of Adam Park, the fifth longest tenured character, after Bulk, Skull, Tommy Oliver, and Billy Cranston, and played by the ever-awesome Johnny Jan Bosch, who I've repeatedly gushed over previously when discussing .ACT-GU and Persona 4. What incites the team-up is a partial recreation of the story of Mega Ranger 19, where Kenta injures a kid and loses confidence in his ability. It's not really an adapted episode at all, but more along the lines of a story inspired by the source material. Carlos is the central character of it, the man ending up wounding Cassie in battle when the Liz Wizard monster uses its ability to swap places with her as he's about to strike it. Now, Carlos has not been known as the nicest of characters. In fact, in his first appearance, he was kind of a dick. So it is to his credit he takes harming his friend and teammate hard, losing confidence in himself and his abilities for a pretty justifiable reason. And it shows when he next encounters the monster as it goes about its goal of collecting specialized research from varied scientists, one of whom happens to be Phenomenus, in his and by proxy Bulk and Skull's first appearance in over a dozen episodes. As said earlier, their parts were inconsequential to the storyline, so to save time and keep focus on the narrative, such were being cut down. So showcased, Carlos does horribly solo against Liz Wizard, leading to Adam's out-of-nowhere intervention, which prompts the monster to retreat. The two make small talk, Carlos explaining about his lack of confidence and a string of recent screw-ups, which prompts Adam to get him to do something neither the Turbo Team nor Space Team have been shown doing. Actually training without use of their powers. While it was a fixture part of the early show, such was downplayed over time, so it was nice to see it as a back-to-basics story. But training doesn't seem to do anything to help fix the mental components, Carlos' own self-doubt. And to be fair, it was a blind spar, those can be legitimately frustrating. He stalks off, Adam concerned, but knowing he can't just do the job for him. Because he's a guest star, not because the space powers are locked to the Rangers this time as Astronema showcased earlier.
Sometimes I still wish I was a Power Ranger.
And the next time you are after this, the event would end up being the third worst team-up in the franchise to date. Not his fault, but it doesn't keep it from being true.
You think this thing still works?
Probably about as well as Windows Vista or the average Apple OS. Though the problem with damaged or broken powers is, there's a risk to their use as the normal safeguards aren't in place.
Which means morphing could destroy you.
But as Carlos hands in his morpher and comes back, he and Adam are attacked by Liz Wizard, meaning...
No, Adam! It's too big of a risk!
Adam, go! It's morphin' time! Go!
This was what I was talking about earlier with properly weighting the risk of death. Adam's morphing, while what we all came here to see, is a desperate gamble that could be lethal, and the show makes that damn clear. And while he succeeds, not only does he not have his full power back, it's exhausting and painful to maintain with the damaged Mastodon coin. However, it's enough time for the two Rangers to rescue them, Carlos regaining his confidence, and we get a brief team-up of the two Black Rangers before the classic morpher fails completely. He's given his farewells and well wishes as the episode ends, setting him off to do whatever it is the characters do when they leave the show. Well, at least we know what Johnny was doing.
Love and peace! Love and peace!
Which leads into the secret of the locket. As Andros continues to try and get information from Darkana about the location of Corone, he's observed by Ecliptor until the scheming mastermind retreats, plotting a new trap to get rid of him. But before that, there's this really good transition not long into the episode with Andros staring at a picture and then moving over to Astronema with her locket. And yes, as the title implies, this is the one that leads into the revelation of her identity as Corone. It actually takes a while to get to it, this episode having a collection of expository segments about her life I've already covered, which just increased the number and frequency of seeding elements to this eventual revelation. Well, on the Ranger side, it's almost completely morphed fights with little actual sign of the main cast actors, aside from voiceover. As has been happening the last few episodes, actually, meaning the show at the time was being carried by a small amount of the main cast. This is likely due to budget, but it does make them stand out all the more in being character-focused narratives. But as one can likely guess from the reminiscence of her past, when she witnesses a family in the next battle she oversees being caught in the crossfire, Astronema saves their lives, becoming bored with the whole enterprise. Andros is lured to Darkonda's trap, only to be saved by Ecliptor, because... I think it's likely he figured out the connection between Andros and Astronema as well, and the likely outcome of her discovering that after he died, she was the one responsible for killing him. But it won't stop Astronema from trying herself as she engages the team once more, in a very impressive exchange that results in her locket being torn from her neck, returning for it later, after Andros has already learned of its contents, the same picture he wears in his own. She naturally doesn't believe it, preferring to think it all an elaborate deception, initially. But as she returns to KO-35 in the following episode, memories of her early childhood she'd long suppressed begin to emerge, leading credence to his words. Ecliptor likewise tries to get the whole story out of Darkonda, their battle briefly recreating Darkliptor, before he breaks free and kills the madman for the 4th time on screen. And of course, leading to Astronema confronting him over all of this, the machine admitting she was given to him because, as I said, evil is not born, it is made. And Ecliptor's temperament was likely the best to bring out the best in her for their side. Well, she says it doesn't matter, and in fact sends a monster out specifically after Andros to, from all appearances, show her loyalty to her cause. When it comes down to it, she can't let her brother die. And so, she decides to defect and lead the Rangers to Zordon. And they're not exactly trusting. While it's been tradition for the show to openly accept former bad guys to their side, well, it's usually been under 2 circumstances. They were brainwashed, or they lost their memories of being evil. Astronema, however, shows no signs of regretting her past actions at this time. And it's wise to be wary when dealing with someone that was previously a villain, as if they still keep showing themselves as villainous, you're proven right to suspect them. And so, as the title, The Ranger's Leap of Faith, implies, they have to take her on her word for now, but aren't going to be stupid about it. Everyone but Andros insisting she be restrained in the main power room. Really? Really? I take back the not going to be stupid part of that statement. You know, she can shoot lightning from her fingers. She could probably kill the lot of you with one well-placed shot and blow up the ship. This is another episode where I feel the directing kills the episode despite the quality content of the writing within it, and this is one showcasing of that fact. As there's nothing that comes with the resultant scene of Andros and Astronema spending the night talking about their family and just casual sibling bonding stuff that implies this had to be carried out on this specific set, and could not have been carried out in any of the other megaship sets. It would have made a hell of a lot more sense to do it in their quarters or in the mess hall, as there is a perfectly understandable context of confined quarters and there's locking points in the mess hall that would more legitimize her being stuck in there. You can lock them in. You can post a guard on the one door that's there, and you don't potentially allow them access to something that would kill the lot of you if she is in fact lying, or potentially break her chains and have free reign otherwise when she's not monitored. I know there isn't exactly a brig set, but you also established the ship has a holodeck. Make one out of light and force fields in the context of the show, and rent out an actual cell for a couple hours to shoot the scene. Or hell, more elaborate bonds made of light and force fields in that little partition. Anyways, as they arrive at the planet, she's brought up, and the Rangers reluctantly restrain themselves in a similar manner to get past security. They get through, but as Andros takes her back to the engine room, the rest divert from the designated path, leading to the ship crashing when...
We've been hit by lightning!
Damn, the Craterites are going to escape the simudeck again! After they're down, Astronema flees out an airlock that just so happens to be in main engineering, and is on a low enough level it easily allows her access to the ground, which is possibly the worst place to have main engineering, which should either be at the core of the ship, or in the rear with the engines, and on a ship that transforms into a giant robot, having it where the center of the torso would be is a mite bigger deal. But I again chalked that up to directing, as you couldn't find a locked door, I don't know, ajar after a crash, its locking mechanism short-circuited. She does have the lightning powers after all. This simply just confirms to the others that this was a trap, but they've got to confirm Zordon isn't here anyways, so the lot head out. Astronomer meeting up with them in the midst of a fight and leading Andros to him. Ecliptor holding off their pursuers in a show of loyalty, not to evil, not to Dark Specter, and not even the Alliance of Evil, but to the surrogate daughter he's raised. I really wish it was better framed to be in that context. Well, Andros, your ship's trashed. Again, you may have lost your team, and you're not likely to live through the day. But look on the bright side. You have your sister back, and you found Zordon! Yeah, about that.
But after all this time, I can't believe that you're still such a fool.
It's a trap!
Yep, that's what it was from the beginning. But the pacing for this reveal is terrible. No time taken to give the moment weight, express the magnitude of this failure, the levels of trust and how deep of a betrayal this was, or even imply that Astronomer herself did not know. Andros led his team into a trap that has likely spelled their doom on his word that they could trust his sister. And there's certainly time. There's a hell of a lot of padding in this episode. Characters repeating or voicing pointless dialogue that just eats time. Hell, there's more time given to the villains gloating than there was creating the moment of total despair and failure. Hell, the two could have been one and the same, just muting or downplaying their laughter as Andros crumbles in on himself. Instead, it just rushes to the next plot point about Astronomer's loyalty. The Rangers saying they knew they were fools to follow Andros in this, when this is likely the biggest missed opportunity of the season. For instead of this, they could have framed it as leading the Rangers to their own execution, their spirits broken from this betrayal, all the while, despite her prominence in this plan, that last night just talking with Andros has made Astronomer appalled by herself, conflicted over the choice she's made to deceive them into this. So, as the metaphorical axe would drop, Corone saves her brother. Because this is the moment she really does choose to become Corone once more. Again, this doesn't change the story of the episode nor one bit of dialogue. It still hits all the same plot points we see here. The only big change is how it is being presented, making it rely on the actor's abilities to carry the scene. And we know they have that ability. It's been presented in the show already. Instead of repeating line after line, Darkada literally having to spell out that she's not loyal to the villain's side in a sequence that makes me want to yell, kids are not that stupid to not catch this. So it's of absolutely no surprise when she shoots him in the back, wasting the strongest emotional impact, what should have made the viewers instantly cast off any wariness about her, because she no longer wants to be the person she's been, and instead it's far weaker than it should be. This is one of the best seasons of the show. This is one of its most pivotal episodes, most important moments. A critical piece to one of the most memorable character story arcs and season storylines. And because of how it's framed, it's one that ends up ultimately forgettable and irrelevant, wasting its importance, especially with what's coming up. And I have thought that since I first saw this episode when I was 9. Good directing can save a bad script. Bad directing can kill a good one. And I feel, were this not so critical to the storyline, it would have here. So yes, in this chaos, she gets the team back to the megaship and they flee, additionally assisted by Ecliptor once more before he falls. The team's still no closer to rescuing Zordon. And this comes with consequences, as Dark Specter wants her back. Corone settles into the ship, even given a gift by the rest of them.
We've decided there's only one thing to do.
And that is to make you an honorary Power Ranger.
Really? I mean, yeah, she has powers and a battle form. This show does tend to be rather forgiving of villains that switch allegiances normally, but isn't this a bit quick to jump to that? The jumpsuit does look pretty cheap, too, though probably limitations of budget there. I would have gone with a jacket with patches similar to theirs, personally, though she does look good without the wigs. On Earth, Bulk, Skull, and Phenomenus catch sight of a giant asteroid out in space. on a collision trajectory for Earth with just enough velocity behind it to wipe the planet out in a manner similar that wiped out the dinosaurs.
I've seen this movie. It hits Paris.
So, how is it Power Rangers in 1998 gets this right, but the show in 2015 and 16 fails that? And yes, I would still like an explanation for that. Yeah, scientific inaccuracies are not a new thing in Power Rangers, error on the moon and whatnot, but such contradictions are usually not major plot points that were used at least 3 previous times in alignment with all evidence to historical accuracy, and whose errors were not originating from the Sentai. The Rangers likewise encounter the giant space rock, sent by Dark Specter, who calls and demands the return of Karone in exchange for stopping it, which makes me wonder how he even sent it careening like that. Was it his power, or did he use technology? They fire upon it, trying to see if it can be demolished by those efforts, which makes me wonder what would have happened had they fired the Mega Voyager's missile at it. Would certainly do more damage than lasers, fired at something the size of Jason David Frank's ego. You know what might work, though? Yes! Gundam knows megaparticle cannons do massive damage! They do call out the Voyager machines, but to do small charges they think will destroy it, as opposed to a big one. And you know, the explosive plan might work if they were trying to divert its course instead of blowing it up. Despite being a 2-parter, Part 1 of Dark Specter's Revenge holds a lot of padding. Professor Phenomenus espousing twice on the danger of the asteroid hitting, almost using the exact same clips and lines each time, before inciting a panic that leads to him and his cohorts trying to get off planet using a very old model rocket that doesn't even succeed in getting him out of the atmosphere, and ends up needing to be saved later from a monster. Wow, this thing clearly foresaw their involvement in Samurai. Karone decides to do her part, attempting to get on board of the Dark Fortress to use it to divert the asteroid, but is captured by Ecliptor, who's been refit and reconditioned. Andros takes it hard, but they've got to focus on Plan B, using the engines of the Megazords to push it out of the path of Earth, after it's already fallen into the planet's gravity well. That's like pushing against the wall of your house when you're laying down and expecting it to move. But they've got backup on the way in the form of Zane, with the Megazord built fresh by La Resistance. Well, at least it's an explanation that makes sense, and it gels with my earlier statement about the alternative reveal of the Mega Voyager. And much like the Mega Voyager, since the name is quite visible on the console, the production team decided to not rename the Mega Winger, which provides the needed thrust to make the asteroid miss Earth. Hey, put it in an orbital path! They can use it as a resource satellite! Zane meets with the others, getting a breakdown of what's happened.
We found out that Astronema is Karone. Darkana was the one that kidnapped her.
You hear that, Zane? You had the hots for your best friend's sister. And isn't that just the way?
I knew there was something good about her. Let's go. I have an interest in her too. What do you mean you have an interest?
Oh, don't cut away. That has comedic gold written all over it.
You went out on a date with my sister? I didn't know she's your sister.
This witty repartee makes Part 2 a lot more memorable than Part 1, by the way, as it's far more better paced and balanced, with Zane and Andros ultimately infiltrating the Dark Fortress to try and save Karone, only to find they're too late.
What did they do to you?
I speak for the Borg.
Well, crap. So much for that redemption arc that they could have started with her. Maybe someone in next year's cast will need to take an emergency leave of absence and you can do it there.